What is up, guys? Yesterday, the 2024 NFL schedule was released, so today I thought it would be fun to go through the NFC and make some predictions on what I think some outcomes could look like. These are not necessarily hot takes, some are bolder than others, but things that I think have a good chance of happening next season. So let's get right into it. My first prediction is probably my most ambitious take of the video, and that is Bryce Young will be a solidified top 15 quarterback, maybe a top 10 quarterback by the end of the 2024 NFL season. This stems mostly from the fact that I just loved him coming out of college, and I think he's good. He struggled this year for sure, and a lot of that was because of his supporting cast, but his film at Alabama was unbelievable. He was the best processor of the field that I've ever seen coming out of college. And if he was 6'1", 220, like Caleb Williams size, I think he would have been regarded as a generational type prospect. This guy was the number one quarterback over CJ Stroud, the pretty much consensus number one quarterback over CJ Stroud for a reason. His supporting cast has significantly improved this year. They traded for Deontay Johnson from Pittsburgh, drafted Xavier Legette, signed guards Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt, which were both overpays, but honestly, I don't even care because you have to keep him upright. And most importantly, they hired Dave Canales, the offensive coordinator from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as their head coach. Canales rejuvenated Baker Mayfield's career, another number one overall pick. And I think he can do the same for Bryce Young, although this is his second year, so it won't be a rejuvenation, but I think he can make Bryce's career take off. I just think he's that good. I believe in Bryce Young. I think last year he was a product of the talent around him, and I think he's going to have a great year this year. Now, this is a prediction that I played around with a lot. I wasn't exactly sure what it was going to be, but I had the overall idea in my head, and I settled on that the Falcons' flaws will be exposed early. Atlanta has a tough schedule to open up. They play the Steelers in week one, which is a good football team that made the playoffs last year, and I think could be better if they get top competent quarterback play from either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Then they travel to Philadelphia and play the Eagles. And regardless of what you think of the Eagles, they have a good roster, and that's a tough matchup. Then they play Kansas City in week three, who are the defending Super Bowl champions. So I think they're going to be tested early, and I don't know if they have the horses to go 2-1 in these games. When evaluating this roster, there were a lot more holes than I thought there were going to be. I think they're going to struggle to get a consistent number two pass catcher. I think Drake London will thrive if Kirk Cousins stays healthy. Darnell Mooney and Rondo Moore inconsistent. Kyle Pitts is injured a lot, and I don't know if Kirk Cousins is going to have a reliable number two receiver. And I guess this discussion is all independent if Kirk Cousins is healthy. In this scenario, I'm going to say that Kirk Cousins returns to form of what he was before he tore his Achilles. And then when evaluating their edge rushers, they have a good interior pass rush, but their edge rushers, Zach Harrison, Arnold Ebiketie, Lorenzo Carter, it's not very impressive at all. I think it's a definitely a lower half unit in the league. And independent of whether you think Penix was a good pick, I think they are going to show that they needed to draft a immediate impact player with a top 10 pick. I think Rome Odunze would be the wide receiver two minimum. I think he's better than Darnell Mooney for sure. And Leatu Latu or Dallas Turner would have been the best edge rusher on this team. So I don't think the Falcons are necessarily going to be bad. I think their floor is probably like 7 wins, 8 wins. They're still an easy division. But I think early in the schedule, it's going to show that they're just not there. They don't have the talent to truly compete in the NFC. My next prediction is that JJ McCarthy won't play a meaningful snap in 2024. Now, this means that he won't play a snap in a close game of a game that means something. This doesn't count if he comes in late in a blowout or starts a game in week 17 or 18 because they have no shot at a playoff spot and they just want to see what he has. I would be really surprised if JJ was the starter in week one. And regardless of what you think of him as a prospect, I think everyone can agree that he is not a pro ready guy. I don't think he is going to be a instant impact starter. I think you need to let him sit, and I think he should sit for the whole season. This might be more of a projection of what I think they should do rather than what I think will happen. But regardless, Kevin O'Connell he's a smart coach and he's a former quarterback. He'll know when McCarthy is ready and when he isn't. And I don't think the Vikings roster is super talented, especially I think they're in a division where three teams are clearly better than them, unless McCarthy comes out and he's like Kirk Cousins in week one, which I don't think will happen. But I think the Vikings should invest long term in their future and go to the way that Jordan Love, like the Jordan Love process or the Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson process, where a first year is a learning year. And I think they should invest in that long term success rather than hope to spark a fire and maybe make a wild card spot or even win a wild card game in the 2024 season. Next, I believe that the Detroit Lions will have a top 10 defense in 2024. This one was a little on the more bold side for me. This is a bet strictly off personnel, although I am a little worried because Aaron Glenn hasn't had a top half of the league defense or really close to it since he was the defensive coordinator in Detroit, but I think that was more off personnel. This team was already had a top five run defense. Their run defense was super good. However, that was overshadowed by how bad their pass defense is because it would be 3rd and 10, the run defense would stop them, and then the secondary would just give up a 20-yard reception and cancel out all of it. But anyway, I'm making a bet off the personnel. I think the Lions got significantly better over the offseason on defense. They added Marcus Davenport, who is good if he can stay healthy, but I mean, he hasn't stayed healthy, so we'll see how that works out. DJ Reader, who is a immovable force at nose tackle, one of the best run stoppers in the NFL. They traded for Carlton Davis, who was the number one corner for a good Tampa Bay defense. Whether you think he can return to that 2020-21 form, I'm not sure if he can. And then Terry and Arnold, who was regarded as a top two cornerback in this class. I believe that the days of Cam Sutton getting 150 yards put up on him in the playoffs and the ball bouncing off Kindle Vildor's head into Brandon Ayuk's hands are over. I think this team is deep on defense. I think they're good. They have a couple question marks. That second pass rusher is a question. Like I said, Davenport hasn't stayed healthy. They have Pascal, who was a high pick in Houston, who had an awesome rookie year, but was injured his second year. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm betting on the personnel. I think on paper, this is a top 10 defense, and I'm excited to see how that translates to the field. My next prediction is that the Dallas Cowboys offense will struggle in 2024. And what I mean by this is that they will struggle relative to how they were last year or the rest of the teams, the rest of the top teams in the NFL. And I like what the Cowboys do. This isn't like a shot at the Cowboys because I don't like them. They're a top five team building team in the NFL, but this year was just the exception. Let's start on the offensive line. They lost left tackle Tyron Smith and center Tyler Biadasz in free agency. And I know they're cap tied, but this just hurt. They drafted Tyler Guyton in the first round to replace Tyron Smith at left tackle, and I didn't mind the pick. The problem is that you're not drafting Tyler Guyton because he is going to be an instant impact player. You draft him because his athletic upside is through the roof, and he can become a great starter in 2 years per se. So I don't know. And then Tyler Biadasz at center. They have Brock Hoffman to replace him, who barely has played so far, and Cooper Beebe, who is a 3rd-round pick, who I think is decent, but I don't know how his game translates to the NFL. And then Terrence Steele at right tackle, who he got paid, but he struggled last year. And this is a funny conversation because they still have 2 All-Pro guards, and one of them is a future Hall of Famer for sure, and Zach Martin. But I just this is the worst offensive line that I can remember the Cowboys having, and definitely the worst offensive line in the Dak Prescott era. And I'm interested to see how an older version of Dak, who has been injured more often, deals with that. And then you move on to their receivers. They have CeeDee Lamb. He's a top 5 receiver for sure in the NFL. And then their secondary targets are Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson had a good year. Brandon Cooks did too, but he's older. He could fall off a cliff at any moment. And beyond that, Jalen Tolbert has just been whatever in his first couple of years. He hasn't really made an impact. And then they just have They have UDFA late round pick receivers. So I'm just worried that either Cooks or Ferguson is going to go down, and this team is going to struggle to replace that production. And then the running backs, losing Tony Pollard hurts. I didn't mind the re-signing of Zeke or signing him back, but he just doesn't have juice like he used to. And Rico Dowdle is good, but he's not Tony Pollard by any means. So this running game, I don't think it's going to be as good. I just have a hard time predicting any of the three phases of the offense, except for quarterback play. I think quarterback play is going to be fine, but receivers, running backs, or offensive line is going to be any better than they were in 2023. And I think that the running back and offensive line are objectively worse. So like I said, I don't think the Cowboys are going to be bad, but I think they're going to regress compared to last year. And there's going to be a couple times during this season where you're like, man, what's happening to the Cowboys offense? Like they need to step it up if they want to actually compete in the playoffs. This next prediction shouldn't be controversial at all. I just put it in because I have a very strong belief that is going to happen, and that is that Derek Carr will get benched in 2024. The Saints struggled last year and they just didn't live up to expectations. I believe they were the favorites to win the NFC South. They probably had the best roster in the NFC South, but it just didn't get put together, and their offense was really atrocious. And I just think that Saints fans, the Saints coaches, the Saints front office is just going to get fed up and bench him. Whether that is in the middle of a game or after a game where he didn't perform well, I think he's going to be replaced at some point in the season. And I was going to say by Spencer Rattler, but I totally forgot that they drafted Jake Haener in the fourth round out of Fresno State. And I don't know which one it will be, but I just think I don't think he makes it through the year. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles defense will be good again in 2024. And this was a tough prediction to make just because they were a top 5 defense in 2022. And then in 2023, they were the worst defense by the end of the year. And I don't even think it was close. It was atrocious to watch. And I kind of went back and forth to this one. I didn't know whether I think they'd be good or not so good, but I don't know. I think they will be a average defense that is towards the better side. So if I think they'll be in the 10 to 20 range, but they'll be closer to 10 than they are 20, which I think is a good defense. And the reason I landed on this is just because the insurance they have in the cornerback room now. They signed CJ Gardner-Johnson to play safety in free agency. They drafted Quinyon Mitchell, who could start day one, and Cooper DeJean, who I don't know who he's going to play. They have him listed as their nickelback, but I'm not sure. Darius Slay is good, but he hasn't been healthy lately. And then you have more bodies in that cornerback room and the secondary in general. And I think that raises the floor of this defense so it's not as bad as it was last year. And then their pass rush is good. Their pass rush was never the problem. Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, Bryce Huff, Josh Sweat, they still have Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham, all those guys. The pass rush is always going to be good. So I just have a hard time envisioning the Eagles defense being as bad as they were and not at least an average defense with all the talent that they added to an already talented defense that frankly underperformed. If I were to make a prediction about why they wouldn't succeed in 2024, I think it would be the linebacker room. I know that like Howie Roseman is the poster boy for positional value in the draft and just in general, but I kind of have an issue with the way he builds his linebacker rooms. He had Zach Cunningham and Shaq Leonard and Nicholas Morrow, who are all older linebackers. And that was a big reason why they were so bad last year, is because their linebackers couldn't make plays. I think they're a little better this year. Nakobe Dean, we'll see how he is. He didn't play a ton. Devin White is listed as their starter. He had that good rookie year in the Super Bowl, and he was like I think he was the 5th overall pick or the 6th overall pick. So he's thought of really highly, but he is not good. I would not feel good about him starting. They signed Oren Burks from San Francisco, who I thought was pretty good, but he was just stuck behind Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. So if they were to not be good, I think that would be the reason why. But like I said, I'm just making the bet on them to succeed based on all the talent that they have. My next prediction is that Drew Lock will start more games for the New York Football Giants than Daniel Jones. This is one that I feel pretty strongly about. I almost said that he's going to be the week 1 starter, but I think the Giants already came out and said that Jones is their guy and Drew Lock was signed to be a backup. but I don't really know if that's true. There's videos of Dable just screaming at Daniel Jones on the sideline, and I think that's hard to repair that relationship. You don't really see that a lot. And I mean, that's how Dable feels about Jones. I mean, you made it pretty evident. So I think that Drew Lock could get have a lot more impact for this team than Daniel Jones. And how I'm predicting this is that Jones will start like the first 5 to 6 games, and then he'll be done. Dable can't. He has enough, and Locke comes in, and I don't know. I'm not. I don't have too strong opinions on how this affects the team. I don't think the Giants are really good enough to make a playoff push. So I'm not sure. This is a thing that I was going through all the depth charts and of every NFC team, and this was one that I'm like, I think this is going to happen, so I threw it in here. This prediction, I don't think is very controversial at all. I believe that a lot of people have the same belief that I do, and that the Commanders' offensive line will be a problem, specifically for Jaden Daniels, their number 2 overall pick at quarterback. This offensive line was the worst in the NFL last year. I think Howell was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. He just got punished, and they took some steps to improve it. They signed Tyler Biotish, center from the Cowboys, who we talked about earlier, and Nick Allegretti from the Chiefs, who started in the Super Bowl in place of Joe Tooney. And I don't know, Biotish is okay. Allegretti, he's barely played. I don't know if I would rely on him. Their right side is pretty good. Sam Cosmi and Andrew Wiley are the right guard and right tackle in that order, and they're okay. They're just guys that you're like, yeah, they're going to be good, not great, not bad. Their left tackle's a problem. Right now it's slated to be Cornelius Lucas, who is not good. He's not a good tackle. And Brandon Coleman, who they drafted in the third round. And I don't know. I wasn't as high on Coleman as everyone else. I wouldn't feel great about him starting in week one. It's tough for me because I liked who the Commanders picked with their 2 second-round picks, and Mike Sainristil and Johnny Newton. I think those are both excellent value picks. And I believe that you should pick players over need, and you shouldn't force a need. However, the need on the offensive line is so great, and that you almost had to pick an offensive lineman. And I just don't know if Coleman would have the same impact as Jackson Powers Johnson. I believe he was still available when they picked in the first time in the second round. And I don't know. It's just this is a different regime, obviously, from over 10 years ago when RG3 got hurt because their offensive line was so bad. But it's just like everyone remembers that, and you just don't want that to happen to Jaden Daniels. And I feel like there'll be a point in this season where people are like, man, I don't know if you can even roll out Daniels, regardless of how good he is, just because that offensive line is going to get him hurt. He's already rail thin, and I mean, you've seen the highlight clips of him getting just like flipped up in the air and stuff. He's like Josh Allen in terms of sliding. He just tries to get the extra yards, which is good. But when you're a skinny franchise quarterback, I'm not sure that's the best idea. So I hope that Brandon Coleman is a good left tackle, because if he is, then I would feel a lot better about this offensive line. But I'm just worried about the talent on this offensive line going into next season. My last prediction is that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will win the NFC South. This isn't a popular prediction because everyone is just assuming that the Falcons will, I feel like. Although I don't really know if that is the case, to be honest. I think the Buccaneers have a better roster, and I feel like I'd rather bet on them than a 36-year-old coming off a torn Achilles in Kirk Cousins. Plus, I think the Buccaneers have a better roster. Their offense got better. They drafted Graham Barton, a guard center, wherever he plays in the first round, for an offensive line that needs improvement. And in the defense, I mean, they lost Shaq Barrett, and Shaq Barrett was a shell of himself. And their linebacker, Devin White, who I mentioned earlier in this video, and that might be addition by subtraction. Their big loss, though, to the defense was Carlton Davis, the cornerback whom they traded to the Lions. And I'm not confident that they'll replace that production right away. But overall, I would just take the Buccaneers. I think Baker Mayfield is comparable to Kirk Cousins, or at least the version of Baker Mayfield that we saw last year. And like I said, I think Tampa Bay has a better roster than the Falcons do. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, the Falcons had a lot of holes. And I think a lot of this is contingent to whether Baker Mayfield can continue at the same level without offensive coordinator Dave Canales, who was the coach of the Carolina Panthers now. because he was a throwaway. The Browns traded him, he was cut and all this stuff, and he was really good last year with the Buccaneers and got a pretty decent contract. And I'll be interested to see if he can replicate that success from the 2023 season. But like I said, I just feel like I want to bank on the Buccaneers more than the Falcons. So I might change my mind by the beginning of the season if there's an injury in the preseason or if Kirk Cousins looks really good in training camp. But like I said, right now I just think the Bucks have a better team. All right, those are some of my early predictions for the NFC in the 2024 season. I will be back soon with a video with some early predictions for the AFC, but that should do it for now, and I'll see you guys later.